This is Joshua English for the Alameda County EMS audio podcast.
They haven't, come up with something that you can put on somebody's forehead and it gives you a pain number. It doesn't work that way. The only accurate assessment of pain is the patient's own subjective description of how much they hurt.
In this episode, I'm in conversation with Mike Tagman, the general manager of AMR in Alameda County. We talk about the ethical issues surrounding pain management, specifically Oligoanalgesia, which is defined as the underuse of analgesics in the face of valid indications. Here's Mike Tagman.
My personal bias, just on pain management in general, is that people hurt. It's a manifestation of suffering, and part of our objective is to relieve suffering. And we have the technology to relieve most of the pain that manifests. There's some kinds of pain, some breakthrough cancer pain and neurogenic pain that doesn't respond well to opiates and that is difficult to manage. In a pre-hospital setting, those tend to get managed using medications that take a much longer time to kick in. But most of the pain that we are presented with, we can manage. And one of the challenges is there's a belief among most people, whether it's explicitly stated or not, that you can look at somebody and you can tell how much pain they're in, and that you can make an assessment of how much pain they're having, how legitimate their pain is. We make judgments about the legitimacy of people's pain. We make judgments about the severity of it. And those judgments feed into our actions guided toward pain relief. And Google, the American Pain Society, is focused on pain management, and it's a really rich website. They've got a lot of research around pain management and a lot of these kinds of issues. And one of the studies that I read on there, I forget the author, suggested that the more experienced a clinician is, the less accurate they are at assessing people's pain. So the newer you are in the business, the better your chances of being able to pick it up, because you'd have, I guess, less stereotypes or whatever around it. But the only reliable, there's no meter. We don't have a pain meter. There's no, physio controller or Lairdale or anybody. They haven't, come up with something that you can put on somebody's forehead and it gives you a pain number. It doesn't work that way. The only accurate assessment of pain is the patient's own subjective description of how much they hurt.
One aspect of this issue is the way that different cultures handle pain.
Some people are really stoic. I remember taking care of a Vietnamese couple. She was in labor, full-term pregnancy. Her water had broken. I'd done the initial check in the house, wasn't crowning or anything like that. And she spoke no English at all. Her husband spoke very little English. I've got him in the back. And we're taking a ride to the hospital. I could feel her abdomen contract, but looking at her face didn't change at all. Just a really beautiful, very relaxed, almost meditative kind of smile. And she was talking quietly back and forth to her husband in Vietnamese. And at one point in time, he looked at me and he said, "Baby, come now." I said, "Excuse me?" He said, "Baby, come now." And I lifted up the sheet and the baby was crowning almost out. I barely caught it before it completely delivered on the stretcher. And her facial expression didn't change at all. And this was it turned out to be an 8-pound baby. It was amazing to me.
Have you ever found yourself in this situation, thinking to yourself, well, if this person was really in pain, they'd be wincing right now or unable to speak in full sentences, so maybe I'm just going to leave my morphine in the box. I asked Mike his perspective on how well we can tell somebody is in pain.
The perspective I bring to this is, first off, I believe in my heart of hearts that I cannot tell how much pain someone else is experiencing. That I'm not able to do that. Even though I've been in this business 37 years, I can't do that. So I have to ask. And I have to believe what I'm told in response.
But believing our patients can sometimes be tainted by the lenses we look at the world through.
And we end up with all these social stereotypes that get in the way. So you've got somebody who has got track marks in their arm. Somebody, looks like they're a heroin addict. Heroin addicts can experience pain. And just because they've been somebody who's used a medication that's a very strong opiate for pain doesn't mean that I shouldn't be giving them pain medication if they've got some issue that is causing them pain. But that's something that kicks in for people a lot.
Another thing that kicks in for people is the concept of guarding the drug box against drug seekers.
You'll hear the phrase frequently, drug seekers, right, in this business. And there are absolutely people who seek drugs. And, the challenge is, am I in a position to make the judgment that the person who presents to me right in this moment is one of those people, and therefore I'm going to deny them medications? And it's like, what is the worst consequence of giving somebody who's a drug seeker morphine? Worst consequence is they're going to call again. They're going to come back for more. And I think in my mind, that's a better consequence to live with than the potential of not relieving the suffering of a fellow human being when I have the tools and mechanisms at hand to be able to do that.
Just as it's impossible to tell just how much pain somebody's experiencing, it's also impossible to tell just who is a drug seeker. And
you can't tell, and people who are chronic users of the system, we've all had our disproportionately high utilizers of 911, right? And they can be frustrating. Oftentimes they're abusive to us with their language, don't smell particularly well sometimes, all those kinds of things. In every system I've worked in, sooner or later, those people end up with a life-threatening situation. And many times they die in that process. And too often, because of the way they have chosen to access the system for years, the system is so insulated to them that we can't diagnose them when they really have a problem. And I know when I worked as a paramedic in Denver, one of our patients she averaged 5 911 calls a week for about 18 months. She was actually a food seeker. She was hungry more than anything, but was an alcoholic and a number of different things. When she cardiac arrested and died, it was in the waiting room at the hospital because she'd been triaged there so many times. That's where she'd been put. So we put blinders on. We've already made the assessment before we've listened to lung sounds, before we've taken a blood pressure, before we've taken an EKG. We've already made a decision that whatever this is not what they claim it to be when they present it the first time. It's a challenge.
You've been listening to the Alameda County EMS audio podcast. This is your host, Joshua English. You can download this and past episodes of this podcast on our website at acgov.org/EMS. You can also download our iPhone application, which has access to our county protocols, as well as very important phone numbers to contact our hospitals. Thanks for listening.